Look, if you've ever been with a narcissist, you already know the pattern. At first, it feels like you've found the most confident, charming person in the room, like they've got life all figured out. But give it time, and that shiny confidence turns into manipulation, lies, and emotional chaos. The truth is, no matter how good it feels in the beginning, everything eventually falls apart with a narcissist, and here's why. You know how every horror movie starts out looking like a love story. The couple meets, everything's perfect. There's a cabin in the woods, maybe some wine by the fire. The music's soft, the lighting's warm, and you're sitting there thinking, wow, this is beautiful. But you already know someone's going to end up dead in the basement by Act 2. That's basically what it feels like to meet a narcissist. At first, it's dazzling. They've got this magnetic energy that sucks you in. The way they talk, the way they carry themselves. It feels like they see something in you that no one else ever has. They're confident, witty, full of big ideas. It's intoxicating, and let's be real, a lot of people fall for it. Because who doesn't want to feel chosen by someone who seems so larger than life? In the beginning, a narcissist knows exactly how to read the room. They know what you crave, what you're insecure about, what kind of attention you secretly wish someone would give you. And they deliver. They mirror you. If you love hiking, suddenly they're into hiking. If you've got a tough relationship with your family, they'll nod with compassion, claiming they've been through the exact same thing. It feels like destiny, like you just stumbled into this deep, rare connection that nobody else would understand. But here's the thing, none of it is real. It's not connection, it's strategy. It's not about you, it's about what they can extract from you. Your admiration, your trust, your energy. And because they're damn good at putting on that shiny mask, you don't see it. Not at first. The beginning phase with a narcissist is like being in a movie trailer. It's all the highlights, all the sizzle, none of the actual plot. And like every trailer, it's edited to hide the ugly parts. They're not showing you their insecurity. They're not showing you the deep, gnawing emptiness that keeps them up at night. They're not showing you the fear that drives their every move. Instead, you get this glossy, supercharged version of them. And because it looks so good, you start buying into it. And here's where it gets dangerous. Because when someone sweeps you off your feet that fast, you don't have time to check the foundation. You don't stop and ask yourself, does this person actually care about me? Do they listen when I'm not flattering them? Do they respect my boundaries? You're too busy riding the high, chasing that validation. It feels like falling in love, but really, you're falling into a trap. The trap is built on illusion. It's built on how good they are at saying the right words, touching the right nerves, promising the right future. And if you've ever been through it, you know how convincing it can be. You think you've finally found the one. You think you've been seen in a way you never have before. But what you don't realize is that they're not actually seeing you. They're projecting a fantasy onto you, and you're playing the part. This is why the beginning feels so addictive. It's not just attention, it's hyper-attention. It's not just love, it's love on steroids. They shower you with compliments, they want to spend every second with you, they make you feel like the center of their universe. And that intensity, that's not love, that's a performance designed to hook you, to make you lower your guard, to convince you to start investing more and more of yourself into them. Because once you're hooked, the rules change, the mask slips, and then you start noticing the cracks. You realize the empathy they had for your struggles was surface level. You realize their grand promises never actually come true. You realize the person you fell for was more of a character than a partner. And that's when the real nightmare begins. But in the opening phase, you don't see any of that. You're too high on the dopamine. You're too drunk on the fantasy. And this is what makes the downfall so devastating. You think you've built something real, but what you've actually built is a house of cards. And no matter how carefully you try to stack it, eventually it collapses. And the hardest pill to swallow is this: the collapse isn't an accident. It's inevitable. Because anything built on illusion cannot survive reality. If you want to understand why everything eventually crumbles with a narcissist, you have to understand their real definition of love. Because for them, love isn't connection, love isn't partnership, love isn't building something together. For them, love is control, that's it. It's not romance, it's not intimacy, it's leverage. See, most of us walk into relationships thinking love is about compromise, growth, maybe a little vulnerability. We think it's about having someone who's got your back, someone you can lean on, someone who challenges you to be better. But to a narcissist, all of that is foreign. That's not how their brain works. Their version of intimacy is power. Their idea of closeness is keeping you just close enough that they can feed off you, but never close enough that you can actually see what's underneath. And here's the trick: they don't advertise it that way. Nobody walks up to you and says, "Hey, just so you know, my version of love is slowly taking control of your emotions until you don't trust yourself anymore." No, they package it in sweetness, in charm, in intensity. It looks like passion, it feels like commitment. But underneath, it's really about ownership. Control is their love language. They control by deciding what's acceptable for you to feel. If you're happy when they're not involved, they'll find a way to pull you back down. If you're sad and they didn't cause it, suddenly your sadness doesn't matter. Your emotions only matter when they can use them. They control by deciding what's real. If you call them out on something, suddenly you're the crazy one. If you bring up an obvious contradiction, they'll twist the story so much that you start doubting your own memory. That's not love, that's psychological warfare dressed up as intimacy. They also control through attention. At first, it's overwhelming. They text constantly, they want to know where you are, what you're doing, who you're with. And you might mistake that for care, like, wow, they really want to be part of my life. But slowly you realize it's not care, it's surveillance. It's not about sharing life, it's about managing yours, and the scariest part, it works. You start second, guessing what you say, what you wear, who you talk to, because you know how they'll react. Without even noticing, you start shrinking yourself just to avoid conflict. That's how control operates. And the more they control, the more you confuse it for love. Because when someone's that invested, when they want to know everything, when they want to dictate how things go, part of you might think, this must mean I matter to them. But no, you don't matter. Their control matters, the way you make them feel matters. You, as a person with your own needs, are irrelevant in the equation. Here's the ugly truth: control is the only way a narcissist knows how to feel safe. Real love, the kind that requires vulnerability, accountability, honesty, that terrifies them. Because real love means giving someone else the power to hurt you, and they can't allow that. So instead, they flip the script. They make sure you're the vulnerable one, you're the accountable one, you're the one bending, apologizing, adjusting. And in that imbalance, they feel secure. Think about it like this. In a healthy relationship, trust is built by both people giving a little, both people taking risks, both people knowing the other could hurt them but choosing not to. With a narcissist, trust is replaced by dominance. It's not, I'll trust you with my heart. It's, I'll control yours so you can't break mine. And here's why this always collapses. Control kills connection. You can't build intimacy on fear. You can't build closeness when every part of you is being managed and manipulated. Eventually, you wake up one day and realize you're not even yourself anymore. You've been bending so long that you don't recognize your own shape. And in that moment, the illusion of love shatters, because love without freedom isn't love, it's captivity. And the brutal irony is this: the very thing they do to feel secure is the thing that destroys every relationship they touch. Control feels like love to them, but to you, it feels like suffocation. And suffocation never lasts. One of the hardest things to accept about being with a narcissist is this simple truth: they don't actually feel empathy the way you do. They can mimic it, sure, they can act like they care. They can say all the right words, nod at the right moments, maybe even shed a tear when the timing's perfect. But it's not real. It's a performance, and like any performance, it only lasts as long as they're getting something out of it. Think about what empathy really is. Empathy is being able to step into someone else's shoes, to feel a bit of their pain or their joy, and to respond in a way that shows you understand. It's not about fixing, it's not about control, it's about connection. Now, for most people, empathy is natural. If you see someone you love hurting, your instinct is to care. If they succeed, your instinct is to celebrate with them. It's not complicated, but for a narcissist, empathy isn't natural. It doesn't live in them the way it does in you. What they have instead is a kind of empathy on demand. They can switch it on when it benefits them and switch it off the second it doesn't. If showing empathy makes you trust them more, they'll put on the show. If pretending to care helps them win you over, they'll do it. But if your pain is inconvenient, if your joy threatens their spotlight, suddenly that empathy vanishes like smoke. That's why being with them feels so unpredictable. One day, they're listening to your problems, giving advice, acting like they're your rock. And the next, the exact same problem makes them roll their eyes, dismiss you, or worse, mock you for being weak. You start to wonder, am I crazy? Did I imagine the version of them that cared? No, you didn't imagine it. They just weren't actually caring. They were acting, and you got attached to the act. This is where the confusion sets in, because in the beginning, their fake empathy is so convincing. They can repeat back your words, they can mirror your emotions, they can say, I understand, that must be so hard, with the same tone you'd expect from someone who truly gets it. But empathy that comes from the head instead of the heart never lasts. Eventually, the mask slips. You notice the way they interrupt, the way they turn the conversation back to themselves, the way your deepest feelings become tools in their arsenal instead of truths to be held. And it's not just about how they respond to you. Watch how they treat other people. A narcissist might show compassion to a stranger if it makes them look good. But when no one's watching, they'll snap, dismiss, or mock without hesitation. You start to see this pattern. Their empathy always has a price tag. It's never free. It's never given because they genuinely care. It's given when it benefits them, withheld when it doesn't. Here's why this matters. Relationships thrive on empathy. Without it, you can't resolve conflict. You can't build trust. You can't feel safe. When you're upset, you need to know your partner isn't just hearing the words, but actually feeling some of what you're going through. With a narcissist, you never get that security. At best, you get the illusion of it. And living inside that illusion is exhausting, because you start bargaining with yourself. You start thinking, maybe if I explain it better, they'll understand. Maybe if I stay calm, they won't shut down. Maybe if I just give them what they want, they'll finally show me some real compassion. But that's not how it works. You can't teach empathy to someone who doesn't want to feel it. You can't force someone to care who's wired to only care about themselves, and that's where the heartbreak happens. Because, deep down, you keep hoping. You keep thinking the version of them that showed up in the beginning, the one who listened, who nodded, who seemed to really get you. That version must still be in there somewhere. You hold out for it, you wait for it, but every time you need it most, it's gone. And every time it's gone, a little piece of you goes with it. This is why everything eventually falls apart, because empathy isn't just a nice extra in a relationship, it's the glue. It's what allows two people to navigate the messiness of life together without destroying each other. Without it, all you're left with is performance, manipulation, and emptiness. And emptiness can't hold a relationship together forever. Being with a narcissist is like trying to fill a bucket with no bottom. No matter how much love, attention, or reassurance you pour in, it all drains out, and tomorrow they'll wake up empty again. Their ego is a bottomless pit, and you are the shovel. And the cruelest part is, the more you give, the more they expect. The more you sacrifice, the less it ever counts. At first, you don't notice it. In the early days, you think, oh, they just need a little extra reassurance. They just need someone who really believes in them. You might even convince yourself you're helping them heal, that your love will be the thing that finally settles them down. But it doesn't, it never does, because the truth is, a narcissist doesn't just want validation, they need it like oxygen. And just like oxygen, the second it runs out, they panic. Everything in their life revolves around feeding that need. Compliments aren't nice extras, they are fuel. Attention isn't just enjoyable, it's survival. Even conflict becomes fuel if it keeps the spotlight on them. That's why so many arguments with a narcissist feel endless, because even fighting keeps their ego fed. Negative attention is still attention, and they'll take it if it means they're at the center of your world. This hunger shapes everything. If you celebrate something in your life, they'll find a way to bring it back to them, either by outshining you or by making you feel guilty for being happy. If you're struggling, they'll spin it so they're the victim, and suddenly your pain doesn't matter unless it serves their narrative. It's like no matter what happens, it always loops back to their needs, their feelings, their image, and you're left wondering, when is it my turn? When do I get to matter? The answer is, you don't. Not in the way you should, because when someone's ego is this starved, it consumes everything around it. Imagine living with someone who has an endless hunger. No matter how much food you put on the table, they eat it all and then look at you like you're selfish for not bringing more. That's what it feels like to be with a narcissist. Like you're constantly failing, constantly coming up short, no matter how much you give. And the scary part is, the more you give, the smaller you become. You lose pieces of yourself trying to keep them satisfied. You silence your needs, you downplay your successes, you walk on eggshells just to avoid triggering that emptiness in them. And yet, somehow, it's never enough. They always need more praise, more attention, more sacrifice. It's like trying to love someone who's allergic to feeling full. The irony here is that deep down, they know this hunger is never satisfied. They know the emptiness is always there, waiting. That's why they panic when the validation slows down. That's why they lash out when the spotlight shifts away. They're terrified of facing that bottomless void inside themselves, so they do everything in their power to keep you focused on feeding it instead. And for a while, you might succeed. For a while, you might actually keep them calm, happy, even loving. But it never lasts, because the second the fuel runs out, the darkness creeps back in, and the cycle starts all over again. This is why relationships with narcissists burn out, because love isn't meant to be a full-time catering service for someone else's ego. Real love has balance. Real love means both people pour into the relationship, and both people get filled. But with a narcissist, the scale is permanently tilted. You pour, they take. You bend, they demand more. You break, and somehow it's still your fault. And here's the kicker. Even if you give them everything, they'll still resent you for it. Because needing that much from someone else makes them feel weak. And weakness is the one thing they can't stand. So the very love and validation they demand from you becomes the same thing they punish you for. You'll hear it in little jabs, in dismissive comments, in accusations that you're too much or not enough. It's insane making, because you're trapped in this loop where giving more doesn't fix anything, but giving less makes it worse. Eventually, you start to realize the truth. Their hunger isn't your responsibility. You can't feed someone into wholeness. You can't love someone into being full, and once that realization sets in, the illusion breaks. You see the bottomless pit for what it really is, an endless, exhausting drain. And in that moment, you finally understand why everything with a narcissist eventually falls apart. One of the most brutal parts of being with a narcissist is the moment the shine wears off. Because at first, you're their obsession, you're their prize. They put you on a pedestal so high you start to believe you're the luckiest person alive. The compliments never stop, the attention is constant, and the intensity makes you feel like you've finally found the kind of love people write novels about. And then, slowly, almost without noticing, that same pedestal turns into a stage for them to tear you apart. This is the cycle of devaluation. The very qualities they once admired in you suddenly become flaws. The quirks they thought were cute are now annoying. The independence they once respected is now selfish. The accomplishments they bragged about to everyone else are now used as weapons to put you down. It's like watching someone flip a switch, and the worst part is, you don't even know what triggered it. One day you're everything, and the next day you're too much, not enough, or both at the same time. And when it happens, your brain can't process it. You replay conversations in your head, wondering what you did wrong. You try harder, bend more, sacrifice more, hoping to get back to the way things used to be. Because deep down, you're not just fighting for them. You're fighting for that version of them that made you feel seen, that made you feel special. You're chasing the high of those first few months when they seemed to worship the ground you walked on. But that version doesn't come back, not really. This is where the gaslighting kicks in. You call them out on their coldness, and suddenly you're too sensitive. You point out their double standards, and suddenly you're crazy or making things up. They deny what they said, twist your words, flip the blame, and you're left doubting your own memory, your own instincts, your own sanity. It's psychological quicks, and you sink the harder you fight to stand your ground. Then comes the silent treatment. They'll disappear emotionally, sometimes physically, leaving you in a state of panic. Because by now, your nervous system has been rewired to need their approval, their attention, their validation. When they pull away, it feels like withdrawal, and that's exactly the point. They want you unsettled, desperate, chasing after them. Because, in that desperation, they get control. The cruelty of this cycle is how deliberate it feels. They know exactly how to lift you up, and exactly how to cut you down. They'll criticize the things you care about most, poke holes in your deepest insecurities, dismiss the parts of you that make you unique. And when you react, when you get angry or cry or defend yourself, they act like you're the problem. Like your emotions are proof that you're unstable, needy, impossible to love. And the scariest part? Sometimes, after they've broken you down, they'll suddenly flip back to the love bombing. They'll apologize just enough, throw in a few sweet words, maybe recreate a moment from the beginning that made you feel adored. And you'll cling to it, thinking that's who they really are. That's the person I fell for, but it's not real. It's just another phase of the cycle, a reset button to keep you hooked. Because if they devalued you nonstop, you'd eventually leave. So, they sprinkle just enough affection to keep you doubting yourself, to keep you hoping. This back and forth is what makes the relationship so addictive. Your brain gets stuck in this loop of highs and lows, of craving their approval and fearing their rejection. It's the same pattern that keeps gamblers glued to slot machines. You never know when the jackpot's coming, but you know if you just keep pulling the lever, eventually you'll win again. Except with a narcissist, the game is rigged. The house always wins and you always lose, and over time, the devaluation erodes you. You stop recognizing yourself. You start apologizing for things you didn't even do. You shrink parts of yourself just to avoid setting them off. You silence your voice because you've been trained to believe it doesn't matter. The person you were when you met them, the confident, vibrant version of yourself, gets buried under layers of self, doubt, and exhaustion. This is why people say being with a narcissist feels like death by 1,000 cuts. It's not one big betrayal. It's the slow, steady erosion of your worth. Little comments, little dismissals, little punishments, until one day you wake up and realize you've been dismantled piece by piece. And here's the kicker: the cycle of devaluation never truly ends. Even if they lure you back with charm, even if they promise change, the pedestal will always turn into a chopping block again. Because the cycle isn't an accident, it's the design. It's how they maintain control, how they feed their ego, how they avoid ever looking at themselves. And that's why every relationship with a narcissist eventually falls apart. Because no one can survive being constantly built up only to be torn back down again. If you really want to see a narcissist unravel, just give them the truth. Nothing exposes them faster, nothing sends them into panic mode quicker, and nothing threatens them more than simple, undeniable reality. Because for a narcissist, the truth isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. It threatens the whole house of cards they've built to survive. See, the rest of us screw up all the time. We say the wrong thing, we hurt people, we make mistakes, and then we deal with it. We apologize, we learn, we move on. Accountability sucks, but it's part of being human. A narcissist doesn't have that gear. They can't sit with the idea that they were wrong or selfish or cruel, because their entire identity is built on being above reproach. So when reality comes knocking, they don't open the door, they bolt it shut and set the house on fire just to keep you from walking in. You'll notice it in the small stuff first. You point out something they said yesterday, and they'll deny it flat out, like the words never left their mouth. You bring up a broken promise, and suddenly you're imagining things. The facts don't matter. Your memory doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is maintaining their version of events, no matter how delusional it sounds. And the more you push back, the harder they fight to rewrite the story. It escalates with bigger things. You catch them in a lie, and instead of owning it, they double down. You confront them with evidence, and they attack your character. You try to have an honest conversation about the impact of their actions, and they turn it into a courtroom where you're the one on trial. Somehow, every single road leads back to you being the problem. That's the magic trick. Truth gets twisted until you're the one apologizing for daring to bring it up in the first place. This is why people describe arguments with narcissists as crazy making. You walk in with a simple, rational point, and you walk out questioning your sanity. Because the goal of the conversation was never resolution, it was survival. For them, survival means protecting their ego at all costs, even if it means burning down reality itself. And the terrifying thing is, they get good at it. They get so good at spinning stories, shifting blame, and playing victim that after a while, you start doubting yourself. You stop trusting your own memory, your own perception. You start thinking, maybe I really am overreacting. Maybe I am too sensitive. That's not an accident. That's the design. Because if you doubt yourself, you'll stop challenging them. And if you stop challenging them, they get to keep living in their carefully constructed fantasy. But that fantasy is fragile. It always has cracks. Because no matter how much they deny, how much they deflect, the truth doesn't go away. It lingers, it seeps through the edges, and deep down, on some buried level they'll never admit to, they know it. That's why their reactions are so extreme. If truth wasn't a threat, they wouldn't fight so viciously against it. But it is. It threatens to expose the emptiness, the lies, the insecurity they've spent their whole lives covering up. And so, truth becomes the enemy, which means honesty, accountability, and growth. All the things a healthy relationship depends on are impossible. You can't build trust with someone who treats facts like weapons. You can't solve problems with someone who believes admitting fault is the same as dying. You can't create intimacy with someone who's terrified of reality itself. That's why the relationship eventually collapses. Because relationships aren't just built on love, they're built on truth, on being able to say, hey, this hurt me, and having the other person actually hear it. On being able to own your flaws and still be loved anyway. With a narcissist, that's off the table. The second you bring in truth, the second you shine a light on what's really happening, the whole illusion starts to crumble. And you can try to avoid it. You can walk on eggshells, swallow your feelings, let lies slide just to keep the peace. But truth has a way of leaking out. Eventually, something happens that can't be ignored. And when it does, the narcissist does what they always do: deny, deflect, or destroy. And that's why, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you sacrifice, no matter how careful you are, everything with a narcissist eventually falls apart. One of the most painful realizations about being with a narcissist is that they don't really see you, not in the way you want to be seen, not as your own person with your own thoughts, feelings, and messy humanity. To them, you're not a partner, you're a mirror. And as long as that mirror reflects back the version of themselves they want to believe in, they'll keep you close. But the second your reflection shows something they don't like, they crack the glass. In the beginning, the mirror is perfect. You're reflecting admiration, desire, validation. You're showing them a version of themselves they desperately want to be. Confident, lovable, special. And because you give them that reflection, they shower you with love, with attention, with everything you think a relationship should be. But remember, it's not about you. It never was. It's about how you make them look, how you make them feel about themselves. This is why your individuality slowly becomes a threat. At first, they might love that you're successful, funny, or ambitious because it makes them feel like they've scored someone impressive. You're a shiny accessory, proof to the world that they're worth something. But the moment your shine starts drawing attention away from them, or the moment your independence shows that you don't need them to survive, suddenly it's a problem. Suddenly you're too much, or selfish, or not supportive enough. What changed? Nothing, except that your reflection stopped being flattering. This is where the cracks in the mirror start showing. Let's say you call them out on a lie, or you stand firm on a boundary. In that moment, the mirror reflects something ugly: accountability, weakness, imperfection, and they can't handle it. Because in their world, they're flawless. They're the victim, the hero, the one who's always right. When you threaten that story, They don't see you as someone who loves them enough to be honest. They see you as a broken mirror that no longer serves its purpose. And what do people do with broken mirrors? They throw them away. That's why their anger can feel so disproportionate. You think you're just having a normal disagreement, but to them, you've committed the ultimate betrayal. You've shown them a reflection of themselves they can't tolerate. And instead of sitting with it, instead of growing from it, they attack the mirror, they attack you. It's subtle at first, a dismissive comment here, a sarcastic jab there, but over time it escalates. They chip away at your confidence, your sense of worth, until you start questioning yourself. And that's the cruel irony. While you're busy trying to prove your value to them, you've forgotten that your only job, in their eyes, was to make them feel valuable in the first place. And the more you lose yourself, the more they push, because a cracked mirror can still reflect. As long as you're willing to bend, contort, and sacrifice yourself, they'll keep using you. But the second you stop, the second you refuse to play the role, they'll shatter the glass completely. They'll discard you, blame you, or move on to someone else who can reflect back the fantasy they need. This is why so many people walk away from narcissistic relationships feeling invisible, because in a very real sense, you were. They didn't fall in love with you, they fell in love with the version of themselves they saw through you. And when that version stopped looking so shiny, the illusion ended. And here's the part that really stings. No matter how much you try, you can never be enough. Because no mirror can permanently fix what's broken inside them. You can reflect beauty, worth, love, and admiration all day long, but the second they turn away, the emptiness returns. And then it's back on you to fill it again, over and over. Until one day you realize you're not living as yourself anymore. You're just living as their reflection. And that's no way to live, because love isn't supposed to be about erasing yourself so someone else can feel whole. Love is about being seen, flaws and all, and still being chosen. With a narcissist, you're never really chosen. You're used, you're useful until you're not. And that's why everything eventually falls apart with a narcissist, because no reflection, no matter how bright, can hold forever. Every relationship with a narcissist is doomed to collapse, and the reason is brutally simple. It's not built on anything real. It's built on performance, on manipulation, on smoke and mirrors. And no matter how carefully they construct the act, reality always shows up. And when it does, the whole thing burns to the ground. Think about what makes a relationship last. It's not just love, it's honesty, it's trust. It's two people being willing to be messy and flawed together. It's the ability to say, I screwed up, I'm sorry, and actually mean it. It's compromise, forgiveness, growth. Without those things, you don't have a partnership, you have a transaction. And that's exactly what being with a narcissist feels like, a transaction. They're not there to share a life with you. They're there to take whatever they can until the well runs dry. And at first, you don't see it, because they're good at making the illusion feel solid. They come on strong, they make promises, they talk about the future. They make you feel like you're building something together. You start to imagine a life, a home, a family, whatever it is you've been craving, and for a while it feels real. But slowly the cracks show, the mask slips, and you start realizing that all those big words, all those promises, they were never about building with you. They were about keeping you hooked. This is why the collapse is inevitable. You can't sustain a relationship on lies. You can't keep pretending manipulation is love. You can't live forever in a world where one person's ego matters more than the other person's soul. Eventually, something gives. Maybe it's a betrayal, maybe it's a blow-up fight, maybe it's just the slow, suffocating weight of constant disappointment. But sooner or later, the foundation gives way, because there was never a real foundation to begin with. And here's the part people don't always understand. The collapse doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's not fireworks and screaming and someone storming out the door. Sometimes it's just silence. Sometimes it's the day you realize you've stopped talking because there's no point. Sometimes it's the day you look in the mirror and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. And you think, I can't do this. Not one more day. Collapse doesn't always explode. It can also just wither. But whether it's loud or quiet, it happens. Because love that isn't grounded in truth can't last. Because no amount of charm, no amount of control, no amount of fake empathy or empty promises can hold together something that was rotten from the start. And even if you're strong enough to keep holding it up, even if you sacrifice yourself over and over just to keep the illusion alive, it still collapses. Because eventually you collapse. The collapse is also inevitable because narcissists don't change. They don't suddenly wake up one morning and decide, you know what, I'm going to start being accountable. I'm going to embrace vulnerability and empathy. No. They double down. They blame. They deflect. They rewrite history. And that resistance to reality makes it impossible for the relationship to evolve. Every healthy relationship has to change over time. It has to bend and flex with life, but a narcissist won't bend. And if something can't bend, it breaks. And when it breaks, you're left with nothing but the truth you tried so hard to ignore, that all along you weren't building something together. You were building something for them. You were carrying the weight. You were doing the work. You were holding everything together while they drained you. And in the end, no one can hold that burden forever. That's why every relationship with a narcissist eventually falls apart, because it was never built to last.